Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Voices in the Valley, Christ Church, where we are. This is our speaker series. Our next Voices in the Valley is very exciting. We have Ted Robinson, the sportscaster, fresh off the Olympics. He's also been a sportscaster for tennis. You're in good company, think of it that way. Tennis, 49ers, he and I will be in conversation here on Tuesday, April 14th. So mark that in your calendar for the next Voices in the Valley, Tuesday, April 14th at 10:30. So I'm thrilled to introduce Walter Moore. Anybody that's aware of the open space on the peninsula, I'm sure, knows who you are. He's been with Post for 30 years in a variety of roles. And I have to say, I think it's a really amazing leadership move when you've worked your way up an organization, you finally get to be president, you're the top dog, you hire someone to replace you, and then you stay on as an advisor. And I think that's really an incredible testament to your leadership. Walter also does a lot of other, has a lot of other volunteer volunteer jobs around related to land trusts and other parts of our community, which I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about. I always like to make a connection between our speakers and this church, and something that I don't know if all of you know, but our own Tricia Suvari, I think, was hired by Walter when she joined Post and worked for him, under him, for a number of years. And so there is a little bit of a personal connection with our church. So Walter said it's great if you'd like to ask questions while he's talking, you're welcome to. We can do a little Q&A afterwards as well.
Thank you very much for having me here today for the Voices in the Valley lecture series. I'm a little intimidated because our founder, Ward Payne, is here with Mary Payne. And he's very appropriately wearing his Post vest. So he is in full representation. Post would not be what it is without Post's dynamic voice and encouraging us to bet the ranch many times through the years and not rest on our laurels and to keep moving forward. So Ward, not too many corrections while I'm speaking. Post was founded in, so here we go, technical stuff, 1977. The Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District's general manager at the time said, wouldn't it be great if we had a land trust nonprofit partner who could work in confidence with landowners? They're a public agency, so they have to do it through a public hearing process, and maybe raise a little money over time, maybe $500,000, something like that over time. You'll get an impression of how much we've raised in the almost 50 years we've been in existence since that time. I'll just read our mission: to protect open space on the peninsula and the South Bay for the benefit of all. So once again, founded in 1977, 5 years after the formation of the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, about 70 staff, which by the way is fairly large for a regional land trust standard. Most land trusts around the United States, of which there's about 1,300, range from 0 staff to a handful of staff, most of them, some of the bigger ones around 2025. So we're relatively large, and that reflects the incredible support we have in our area for our work. We are what's called a 501c3 nonprofit organization. That means all of our funding and effort has to go into that mission I just read a moment ago. This gives you an impression of what it means to protect over 96,000 acres in our history from 1977 when we were founded to what it is today. The darker color green are all the projects that we've been involved in, and then the others are the ones that have been protected as well. The purpleness of this, so the way we work is, you could imagine we get the question a lot of how do you decide which projects you work on and where. So we have what's called a land ranking criteria. That land ranking criteria, and you're going to learn about our different programs in a moment, are done based on a point system that we apply to based on multiple databases in our area. of lands that we deem important, and so we really figure out the top lands that we really want to make sure we're doing everything to protect, and gives us kind of a scaling of, since we're not going to protect everything, what are the most important ones based on our programs and our priorities, and then we assess from there. Then we work, as you'll get numerous examples. What I'm going to do today in each of 4 program areas is give you examples of the programs and then of the, am I able to move it forward slide by slide? And we use different tools to help protect these properties. One is buy-in fee, another is conservation easements, and then we partner with many of the agencies in this area, like Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space, county parks, state parks, numerous different agencies that we work with. So what I'm going to do today is go through our 4 main program areas: farmland, public access, redwoods, and wildlife linkages. In each of them, I'll try to give you a flavor of what we're trying to do in that area, and some examples, direct examples, in each of those areas of what we've done. So we're going to go in order. So let's start with the farmland. So since the 1980s, we've lost almost 200,000 acres of agricultural land in our area, which was half of the agricultural land in San Mateo County, and converted to development and no longer in production. We have, since we initiated the farmland program in 2016, we've protected approximately 12 farms, and you can see how they are. Most of our work, as you can imagine, is along the coast. So the Farmland Futures Initiative, the goal was to triple the number of farms. So we've done about a dozen. We hope to protect over 36 over time. That'll take some time. We have met our initial goal of $25 million. And as we talked about in those dozen projects, we've invested close to $50 million in that acquisition and protection, and over $5 million in farm and land ranch infrastructure. And so I wanted to share with you too some of the other things that make farms sustainable. I already talked about the protection of the lands, but farms also require a number of other infrastructure to make sure that they are sustainable. So one is barns and the infrastructure. So we've helped construct or repair 7 barns and shed. We provided significant additional farm working housing, which is a really critical component of farmland, with a number of units with dozens of bedrooms. We've managed a number of leases, as well as improved water, which is really important on the wells, the 4 springs, and then finally repair and restoration of areas. So if you'll advance forward. So I'm just going to say next slide, and you go to the next one. Next slide. And so the example I want to give you is Ryan Casey, who's the gentleman in the lower quadrant right there at Blue House Farms. So this is an area that's just before you get to the town of La Honda on Highway 84. It's on your south side as you're heading out 84, and it usually has the UPIC operation sign on the outside. Next slide. And we're going to go through fast through this, Angela, so if you'll stay with me on this one. So first of all, this is when we look at a property like this, it's about 40 acres. You see ag areas, you see water, you see some of the infrastructure. The way we think about protecting it under what we call an affirmative agricultural easement, which I'll explain more in a minute, is we divided into segments. So the first section, next slide, is the riparian corridor, which we hope to put in permanent protection. Next slide. And then a buffer to that area to help protect the stream flow and the water flow in that area for endangered species like steelhead salmon. Next slide. And then we have an affirmative agricultural easement. What does that mean? It means that this farmer or the person who owns land is required to keep this in agriculture because these are prime soils, very rare soils. So that means what we're trying to prevent in the future is the value going up to a luxury housing development value. That's the competition for this. So the way you do that is make sure that it stays in agricultural production. Next slide. So what we then do is carve out an area that's allowed for the yellow is where the infrastructure and residents and those farm labor housing, the barns, everything can be contained in that area. Next slide. And then we spent quite a bit of money working with the Resource Conservation District upgrading the 40-acre reservoir on the property that allows the farmer to have continuity in terms of his water supply through the season, and also doesn't put demands on the creek corridor in the drier months. So next slide. So that's how we secure a foundation for the future of this farm as a vision, and how we work on farmland projects. Next slide. So the next one I'm going to go into public access, fairly straightforward. What that means is connecting people to the outdoors. Next slide. And Angela, I can't use your computer over here again, so I'll just go from the top of my head. We'll see how it goes. Regional trails. So we work on 3 major, pause, take a breath. Any questions on farmland? Anything about that while we're in that before I head into public access, please?
Where is the water source for that reservoir?
So the water sources on these properties can come from a number of different ways. One is wells. This one happens to come from La Honda Creek. And so that off-stream impoundment, what we call a reservoir, is really critical, because having 40-acre feet means they're not pulling out of that creek in the dry season. So there's still passage for fish and wildlife.
Thank you.
Are there any, there always are, like unintended consequences, for instance, on the work with the farms that you guys have dealt with, trade-offs that you've had to balance along the way?
We've had to be a bit more flexible. I'm not sure that's what we mean, so if you have a more specific question. One of the trade-offs we've had to do is farming's hard. And so us just slapping a label of requiring a farmer to be organic is not particularly helpful. So while we would like movement in that direction, we don't require it, because that's a pretty high standard and it can be endangered or turned over very easily. And so when a farmer is trying to get towards that direction, having a requirement is not helpful. What's another example? Farm labor housing is a very challenging issue. I think some of you may remember the horrible issues that came up in Half Moon Bay a while ago. We're one of the few entities that have actually done quite a bit of work in bringing on high quality farm labor housing for these areas. Very difficult to do. I would say there's so many things farmers have to deal with. The fact that we can come in and deal with the bureaucracy of getting the funding and getting that online. I could go into a long story about the incredible work Supervisor Horsley, unfortunately passed away, did in creating funding for farm labor housing. So lots of issues for farmers, unfortunately.
How long are the easements? Are there time frames?
So all of the easements we do are what's called in perpetuity. They run with the land in perpetuity. And so what that means is, as a 501c3 land trust, we have a in perpetuity obligation to monitor and enforce that easement. So we come out once a year. Hold on just a second. We come out once a year and compare the eased area to what it was when we got the property. We see if there's any violations. If we aren't, we say, nice to see you. See you again next year. Typically, most landowners we work with is not an issue at all, because they want to abide by the easement requirements. But that's, when you go on title to the property, you will see the easement against the property, recorded against the property.
So there's a fundamental law in property law called the rule against perpetuities. And that's something I deal with in state parks and my own work. And it's usually 99 years. And there's a way, how do you overcome in perpetuity again with the fundamental property rights?
So forgive me for my different understanding from that is, I'm an attorney too, that's an estate planning restriction about how long you have to give things over. It's not a restriction against, you can have in perpetuity. A conservation easement is just like a road easement on the property. It's against title for the rest of its life, in perpetuity. It's actually Civil Code Section 815, and it's in the California codes. That is a desired outcome by the state.
It's just a case of why on this very issue, and I'm going to get you the documents. It would be a different finding.
Fair enough. All right. So we work on so first I'll start with programs, and I'll start with give you a couple examples of public access. When are we going till? Till when? 11:30? Okay, so I'll leave questions too. I'll give you an example of a couple of programs, and then I'll give you examples of actual public access projects we're doing. So each of these I think are pretty cool because I'm actually hiking the Beta C Trail. So that's, I'm going to start with the bottom one, the Bay Area Ridge Trail, which is it's hoped for, a 550-mile loop that goes around the entire bay. It's not complete. It's got about 400 acres complete, 400 miles complete. In our area, what are the numbers? It's about 120 miles, I think, in San Mateo County, and it's about 70% complete, I believe. So our role in the Bay Area Ridge Trail is mostly acquisition of lands that it can go through. However, with the California Coastal Trail, which is a 1,200-mile trail that runs from Oregon down to Mexico through California, we have about 60 miles in San Mateo County, and about half of that is done, and of the other half, 40 of those 60 miles are done. Of the 20 miles that are left, Post is actually doing planning work for about 18 miles of that, where we've done feasibility studies about where is the best location for that trail to go along the coast. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that in a minute. If you like the California Coastal Trail, we're doing great work on that. And then finally, the Bay Area Ridge Trail. Let's see if I can shake. Oh, can you take that back, please? Yeah, so I can do it now. Great, thank you. And so the last one I'm going to take you through is called the the Bay to Sea Trail. And that's one that Post came up with because we really wanted to see a link across from the coast through the Mid-Peninsula over to Ravenwoods Open Space Reserve. And what we're fortunate here is, pardon my shaking, I am an attorney, but I'm not a doctor, and there's a reason why. See if I can do the pointer. Nope, can't do the pointer on that screen. So all of the lands from the coast over to Edgewood County Park are protected, and most of them have trails through them. So of this 40-mile trail, over half are already in place. So what we're trying to do is connect it from Edgewood all the way down to Ravenswood. And the advantage we have is there's something called the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission pipeline corridor through that area. And if you've noticed that in other sections of the peninsula, it is actually used as trails. So there are long segments of that we can use to connect it up. And then the other cool thing is right where it says Bay to Sea Trail, on the very eastern side of the trail is called the Dumbarton Trail Corridor. And that runs from the bay all the way to the Redwood City Transit Center. And so our hope is as they develop that for public commuting, we have demonstrated how it also can incorporate hiking and biking along there too. So this is going to take time. That's the nice thing about being an institution, is you can do these things over time. But hopefully one day this will come into being. So I'm really excited to tell you, years and years in the making. We actually bought this almost a decade ago for 60 acres for, I know you can't believe this, $5 million. At the time, it was not known, and now it's public, so I can say it because we were under a confidentiality agreement, but the singer Chris Isaak had owned the land. The challenge that had happened was that rave parties were happening on this very remote, hard-to-get-to beach. The reason this is a hard-to-get-to beach is because you either climb down the cliffs or you come up the creek, Tinitas Creek corridor. So those were both being wrecked, and what would happen is people would haul all of their gear down to these big rave parties, and they'd leave all their trash. There was no amenities, no restrooms, no emergency services, so people were injured and died down there. So our wonderful, 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 wonderful supervisor at the time, Don Horsley, called me up and said, can you guys do anything about acquiring it? If you can, I will bring online, which was very unusual for a supervisor just to say right away, I will bring online the staff needed to run it as a county park, which he did before he passed away. So we have spent the entire time since we acquired it, first we transferred it to county parks, and then we've done, oh, Angela, it's working great, thank you. Creating a future park experience is going to be amazing. So if you drive by there right now, this is just south of Half Moon Bay by a couple of miles, you will see block and stuff and a bunch of development going up on the top. Well, there'll be 3 levels. You can pull out on the bluff where there'll be, I think it's 60 car parking lot or more, and just view out from there to that view. You can go to the next level. This is all being installed right now, and have a lovely sitting area, picnic area, interpretation area. And there is you can go hike down this trail all the way down below. Now, the reason I'm showing this not very pretty pictures, this is what happens in our work, is you want to get it open. We were hoping to have this open 3 years ago. And different issues came up. And the latest issue that came up last year is this is the main access down to the beach. So it needs to be safe. Unfortunately, this had a slide in it. And so the county was not comfortable opening it until they had shored up that slide. So please let us know when I'll do a little prayer since we're in church. Have this open this year, sometime this year is our dream. So we'll see. The other benefit of this is we're also planned for a 2-mile loop trail that you can take. It is 60 acres, so you'll be able to take it south and then come back along the beach back to the main parking area. The other one I'm really, really excited about is just north of San Gregorio State Beach is a property we call San Gregorio Ranch. And it is spectacular. It has its own beach access. For those of you who have been around a few decades in this area, it's known as the nude beach for this area. It has this really lovely rolling landscape, and we acquired it for $10 million. We're raising $16 million in order to have $4 million to bring it up to state parks operating standards so they can open it pretty quickly, and then another $2 million for an operating fund. If you have another hour, I'll take you about the difficulties it takes to get you a property into state parks' hands. And this is, mentioned earlier, I was going to tell you more about the opportunities for the California Coastal Trail. For those of you who are familiar with State 84 and the junction where it comes into Highway 1, the road goes up from there. It's one of the most dangerous places for bicycles to go through. So our dream in the future, and for hikers, is to pull that off, as you can see, and create a lovely, true coastal trail, California Coastal Trail, through the property. Any questions on public access or any of those projects before I go into Redwoods?
So I live up on the Skyline area, and we know that the Ridge Trail is coming, but there's not really any facilities for all the people that are coming up to use it, especially if they're going to bring around the bay. And I know that's not really your issue, but
so I strongly, strongly encourage you to get in contact with the very good Bay Area Bay Area Ridge Trail Council. And they are a 501c3 nonprofit. They have a staff, and they're the ones who are looking into how to address issues like that. So the more early and often you get in and help with that comment and make sure that they're aware there are concerns about that in the area, they can start incorporating that into their planning as new trails come on. And they are bringing more and more trails online. Our area happens to be one of the most complete of the Ridge Trail areas, but so Bay Area Ridge Trail Council. Okay, on to Redwoods. So we've lost 95% of the old growth redwoods throughout their natural range. So that means from here, Big Sur, all the way up to just north of the California border. So just like with our farmland, where our first goal is to help protect the remaining properties that there are. There's so few left. We're trying to also, and I'll give you some examples of this, lead recovery efforts in that area, and then also advance a network of partners who are helping to do both the protection and the work. So breaking it down more specifically, in each program area, we have strategies. And so in this area, our strategy to increase ecological forest health and resilience is to maintain intact core habitat. So once again, protection, protection, protection. I'm going to give you an example of a project called San Vicente Redwoods. And then restoration, this is one of the areas we have been forced directly into massive restoration work. And I'm going to give you examples of how we're trying to remove accumulated fuel from the landscape and the importance of that, and build regional capacity for prescribed burning, and also expanding public access. So I'm sorry my little dot thing doesn't work on the screen, but you can see a property inside the bigger demarc zone, which was the area of the CZU Lightning Complex fire, but inside, which was 86,000 acres. Inside of that is also 8,600 acre San Vicente Redwoods that we co-manage with 4 other land trusts. And we are trying to demonstrate how this property can be shown to be or brought back to fire resilience and sustainable working forests. So let me show you some examples of how we're doing that, starting first with what we were dealing with. So as many of you experienced in the horrible weather conditions and the air quality after that, we had over 86,000 acres burned in the CZU Lightning Complex fire in August 2020. The really big challenge of this fire was the multiple ignition points, and so it made getting after it very difficult. It moved over 40,000 acres overnight and was active for over a month. And the really interesting thing that I want to share with you is the mosaic of what we call burn severities, from high severity to very low severity. And low severity is a good thing, and I'll show you that in a second. So here's a map of red being high severity, green being, yellow being lower severity. And here was just 6 months before the fire, we had done a prescribed burn in the area on the left on this screen. And what you notice about that area is there's still canopy cover. There isn't a lot of foliage down below, whereas the burned area now has no canopy up above. It has dead trees, and it has dense canopy of understory, which is actually exacerbating fire conditions in the future. So in those areas where the high severity fires happen, the big challenge is what you do with all the biomass. How do you deal with that in a way that is reasonable? Because each of these has both of its benefits and negatives. So you can try pile burning, scattering chips. This is called incineration, where you're dumping logs and debris into what's called an air curtain burner. And so this is a shipping container sized device that has tiles on the inside. It burns very hot, and it has air that's circulating the fire back through. So it's incinerating very quickly. The problem is you have to make it somewhat economic, you have to run bulldozers all day long, every day, 7 days a week, in order to even meet the demand and make it worthwhile to do it. And then the challenge of transportation out of the region is just the expense of doing that. So it's really tough to find a good solution for how to deal with all this. So before we go to the next one, any questions on San Vicente Redwoods or that area? So one other example we have of the redwoods work we're trying to do sits right up behind us. Most of you probably know of this property, 360 acres. Post now holds a 50% interest in that property, and there's 2 other owners with 25% ownership interest each. The property stretches, there we are down there, right in the corner on Portola Road. From here all the way up to Skyline. Our main interest in the property has been the protection of the redwood forest at the top, particularly because it sits adjacent to Windy Hill Open Space Preserve. So when you own interest in property. It substantially increases the complexity and complication of, and our desired approach to separate those interests over time. So we're working with the co-owners to do so, and it'll take considerable more time to do that. As you can imagine, there's a lot of challenging issues, and so basically it'll remain the way it is for quite some time to come.
Can you point out where our church is on that map?
So I'm sorry, the little, you can just see the label of Portola Road right along there, and right where that thing takes a little cutout, you're right up in there.
Okay, so we're looking up this way.
Yeah. Please?
The two smaller circles inside the bigger piece, what does that represent?
Those are called inholdings, so they are separately owned by other individuals, and they, other than the fact that they get water through mutual agreement with the rest of the property, those are owned separately and not part of this property. And I think they're approximately 10 acres each. Okay? So the example I want to give you in the wildlife linkages area is the considerable work we've been doing in an area called Coyote Valley. Coyote Valley sits as the closest junction between the peninsula, which is the Santa Cruz Mountains, a bottleneck, if you will, and the Diablo Range. And in each of those areas, they have considerable major protected land. And so because of the development of Silicon Valley and all of the area, the sort of wider area is all developed area. The only area remaining undeveloped between those two mountain ranges is Coyote Valley. And so that's why we started focusing on it about a decade ago, because of its critical importance in connecting wildlife from the bottleneck of the peninsula over to the East Bay, and I'll show you other corridors we're trying to create as well. And so this shows you the link between, that we're going to talk about first, between Coyote Valley, and then another link south to the Gavilan Range and up to the Upper Pajaro corridor. And we'll do each of these three sections. So we've been very fortunate since about 2015 to have acquired in Coyote Valley and very nearby about 7,500 acres in this area, about 2,000 acres in the valley itself. We've had such a success with our partners, the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, that the zoning for this area was changed by the city and the county from light industrial commercial to open space and agriculture. So right now, now that we've had the success, we're looking down the road, what are the other potential issues related to getting wildlife through this area? And that's one of our main challenges and concerns. And it's something called the triple barrier threat. The triple barrier threat is the fact that if we want to have wildlife connectivity, flood protection, well, not all of these things, particularly wildlife connectivity, we have three major barriers. Number two, wildlife movement. US 101, even though it does have some underpasses, the rail corridor that goes through there might be the future high-speed rail corridor, and Monterey Road. For those of you who have been down in that area, Monterey Road is 4 to 6 lanes apart. It's flat on the ground. It has a middle divide with a fence between it. So we've been thinking, how are we going to get through this area? So we're starting to do a connectivity planning project. We got a $5 million grant from the Wildlife Conservation Board to figure out how can you move wildlife through this area to get them from large protected lands over to other large protected lands through this triple barrier area. Part of these studies was, hate the term, but the roadkill studies, very sad, but it also shows you where wildlife is trying to get through an area. We also do bobcat collaring studies, and a combination of these and other analysis led us to the conclusion that we could do wildlife crossings in a number of locations, and that even allowed us to pinpoint the one we should start with, the Fisher Creek wildlife crossing because that was where the biggest opportunity was and where a lot of wildlife was trying to get through. What do I mean by a crossing? So in our case, it's going under the road. The Annenberg crossing down in LA went over the road. That one cost $140 million, I think. These cost more in the 10 to 20 million, and we're hoping to do as many as possible because just like diversity is great in nature, diversity is great in having multiple areas for animals to get through. So big part of our work in the future is this kind of restoration, what we're calling transformative conservation, meaning trying to reestablish connections, restore the land to allow wildlife to survive and thrive. Here's an example of all the photos that show wildlife using already the existing culverts and things, the most famous of which was the coyote badger, for those of you who saw the buddies working together to hunt, a coyote and badger working together, and they're right over here. We had a fun time a couple of years ago where we had everything from news reports to Stephen Colbert featuring it on his show, because very cute, because the badger waited for the coyote to come out and then trotted along because they hunt together. So I want to back up now. So we were talking very specifically about Coyote Valley and how to get through that area. Now I want to back up and to a broader range and talk about how we're trying to work to expand the linkage at a regional scale, connecting the Santa Cruz Mountains to the rest of the state for biodiversity and climate resilience. So down to the Gavilan is one I'm going to talk about more recently, since I've departed as president, and I fully support. There's a lot of work been going on in the upper Pajaro Valley, but I'm not going to talk about that as much because I don't know it quite as well as I know. And plus, this one has a couple of recent, the Gavilan, getting down the Gavilan Range has a couple of new front page articles that you might have seen if anybody still gets the Mercury News. There are two big projects that are examples of this to the south. The first is Sargent Ranch, over 6,000 acres. It was the ancestral land home of the Amamutsan Land Trust, so very important to them. Hugely important because of the area it sits in, surrounded by other large unprotected lands, but also heading down into the Gavilan Range. We have spent quite some time diverting this from the big controversy was it was being proposed for a sand quarry, and so now it no longer is threatened by that. And this was one of the two. This happened in January. The final purchase on this has been in phases. That was on the front of the Mercury News. And then Mead Ranch, 2,000 acres, closer to Coyote Valley, but still along this corridor. And it connects, as I'll show you on the next map, in its immediate area, over 38,000 acres of lands we've already protected, like Lakeside and some others. And as you can see right down below, the green at the very top in the squares is the first map I showed you of the protected areas of Coyote Valley. So it's very close to that, starting to protect the hillsides up around it and expanding the protection of the hillsides up around it. Really sensational property with multiple benefits. That was on the front page of the Mercury News a couple of weeks ago. So very excited about that acquisition as well. So with that, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. And that last section, once again, was wildlife linkages. So that's where we left off.
I'd like to just give the microphone to anybody who has a question.
And I'll also be here over lunch, too, for, yep.
Thank you. This is a funny question, but I have done a lot of fundraising, and I always wonder with Post, do you have more success before the fact or after the fact? Like asking people, like, we're thinking about doing this, or we're thinking about expanding in this area, give us money now, or after you've done something to say, wow, look at this amazing thing we did, and we need your support. What is the strategy?
I think the biggest success we've had is, and I'll use a 200 million Saving the Endangered Coast campaign we have, it is setting a broad vision And then the great thing about our work, nonprofit work, is you can take people out to kick the dirt and see what it is and how beautiful it is, whether it's redwoods or a beach or something else. So it's a combination of both. So you've got a broader vision of what you're trying to do, and then you're offering, like I tried to do in the slideshow, specific examples of the land that's being protected. And even better is insider tours of lands that have been under contract but are still confidential before you open them up to the public, and then they can be part of that story as well.
So you mentioned cooperation with other land trusts. So how does that work? Do you like split up areas, or are there different types of things that people go for? What do you sort of talk about how that works with the other ones?
Great question. So I'll start with a fundamental background on land trusts. Each of them is different. And so, for example, there are land trusts that are just dedicated to ranch land. There are other land trusts like the Marin Agricultural Land Trust up in the North Bay, just to agriculture. Some land trusts only do education or something. The Save the Redwoods, you tell me what they do. Sempervirens, very focused on the Redwood region in our area. So when we partner with them, we're each trying to take our key strength and combine it together. The reason that worked on San Vicente Redwoods is because Save the Redwoods, Sempervirens both cared greatly about redwoods. The Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, it's their county, and then Post, and we, as you see, it's one of our program areas. So each of us took a component of it. For example, the Save the Redwoods holds the easement against the property. The Land Trust of Santa Cruz County does the public access on the property, and then Post and Sempervirens are responsible for most of the management of the rest of the property.
And can you say something? So you said you had 70 people, and that is a big staff. What's the sort of split of activities?
So half of them is what we call our program staff, and that in turn is divided into the land acquisition team, the transformative conservation or restoration team, and what we call our management or stewardship team, because it takes some time to transfer lands on. Each land trust is different this way too. Some land trusts like to hold on to lands for a long time and operate them. We're not in that mode. We like to get them transferred on to agencies that are built for that and get the agency's money to do that. I can give an example of that. Lost your question. Oh, so the other half is half divided between our communications and fundraising, administration, executive, and accounting, finance.
I have the mic. Hi, and thank you. This is amazing. Mary Hufty, Vice Mayor. I have the greatest admiration for both this presentation and for the transformative work you've done for our town.
Oh, thanks, Mary.
So I think we sense anyway that more than 50% of our land has been contributed to the town's land.
Hers went out.
More than 50% of the town's land has been controlled at one point or the other by Post. So there are two different lands in Portola Valley that are, I think, near and dear to all of our hearts. And one is Hawthorns and the other is El Mirador. And so I wondered if you could take just a second to explain, or not as much time as you have, actually, because we're that deeply interested, to explain how the conservation easements long-term, how the town best work with the conservation easements and those big land pieces, and any updates on Hawthorns in particular would be really helpful.
So while Post does own a conservation easement over Hawthorns, we are not, your question is actually better directed to the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. They're running the whole process. So unfortunately, I'm not directly involved in that, so I can't answer that. And as for El Mirador, as I mentioned earlier, where there is no protection over it, no easement over it, it's just we own a 50% interest in it.
So So maybe it's a small piece, but there is an influence in Post at Hawthorne's because they're always talking about the conservation
About the easement, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we
so
are
if you
making
could
sure that whatever.
eliminate that just a tad for me, it would be really helpful.
So the former owner of it, name is slipping. He was a veterinarian, right? And he donated the easement to Post, and sorry, it's been a while, but my general reflection is it's a very general easement that sort of generally restricts the building to where it is now. And so we are monitoring that easement is followed as the district is pursuing its vision for the property. Sorry, I'm just not directly involved in that one.
Thank you. Is this working? Thank you for your talk.
I don't think it is. He's going to bring another one.
I was your predecessor of Voices for the Valley, and I can say you're giving Ted Robinson a run for his money.
I don't think so.
I'm really interested in your 30-year tenure and how you have seen the communal consciousness around protecting public land. My family is from Chile. We own about 8,000 acres in the Santiago region. And today down there, I often say that we're 30 years behind Portola Valley in this area in terms of many things. I think we might be a little farther when it comes to conservation in metropolitan areas and a sense of land as something you might protect for a public good. I'm just interested in the 30 years, how you've seen that evolve. I understand Post was created, as you said, I think 4 years after there was actually a vote, a community vote to protect. So I'm sure that helped a lot. But interested in your
5 years
perspective.
after.
5 years.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear what Ward thinks, but what's the evolution been? I can give you some examples. So one evolution was when I first came on in the land conservation community, it was anathema to cut down a redwood tree. And the problem with that is many of the redwood forests in our area have already been subject to harvest. And that meant they had uniform trees coming up. And when you have uniform trees coming up, they're crowding each other out. And that's part of a natural process that takes hundreds of years to do. But you can encourage old growth trees by managing the forest, which means cutting the trees. So I don't know if Ward remembers, but we had a board member who was very adamantly opposed to that, and quite a few donors very opposed to that too, until we were able to take them out and show them this is for the health and restoration and future health of sustainability of the forest. So that was one example. It's a hard question to answer because this area has been so supportive the whole time I've been in this work. The key leaders of the early Silicon Valley community, from Gordon Moore to David Packard and many others, were incredibly supportive of the work that we do. And that continues to this day with new, really amazing people coming in to support the work. Sorry.
Windy Hill. So I know Windy Hill is mid-Penn, but I talk to a lot of people in town and all over the place, that think if Windy Hill was golden again, it would be great fun for fundraising. I mean, it's now covered with coyote bush. If there was a prescribed burn and it was gold, I think there were the donations from everybody in the Bay Area looking up at, the golden domes. I think it would be really fabulous for all open space groups.
I'd be happy to introduce you to Kirk Lennington. He is the Natural Resources Manager at the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. And they are a public agency, so it's part of their duty to receive feedback and to incorporate that into their thinking about planning, management, and restoration for an area. And so as the holders, managers of their property, that's the individual you'd really like to direct that thought to.
And I think a lot of people are interested in prescribed burns. So, I just think that this could be advertised in such a way that Windy Hill is coming back, the golden Windy Hill. Anyway, I would love to talk to this person.
Great. It's a lovely idea. I would say prescribed burns, we have a very hard time doing those even in rural areas. It makes people, understandably, very nervous, and the conditions have to be just perfect. So I think that would be a tool that would be pretty tough in a highly densely populated area like this, but that's just my 2 cents.
Let's do one more question here, and then we should go to the library.
He was raising his hand for quite a while in the purple.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I served on the State Parks Commission in the 1980s, and have you had changes over time in interfacing with them and other public agencies due to political, other political issues, such as the now mandated for extensive housing that the legislature and the governor have signed into law? I'm just saying, what's the kind of general trend in cooperating with public agencies like state parks, while the other issues, the Monster Builders Association, is conflicting with you? How's that working out?
So fun in with this question because I'm actually involved very directly with state parks now. They have been moribund in acquisitions for over a decade. So they have been asking land trusts like ours to acquire lands through the years, and then we have had to hold them and sit on them because they haven't had a chief of acquisitions. They've had no staff in the department, and most of all, no money. And if all of that was enough, it's compounded by the fact of, I said I wasn't going to get into this earlier, but I am now. Department of General Service, Department of Finance, and another agency, all of whom are dedicated to not having any lands go to state parks that causes any more staff requirements on the state because of the state budget. So I am now leading a working group with the new, chief of acquisitions that they just hired a year and a half ago. We helped pass 2 bills that remove the DGS and finance oversight on projects under a certain level, still go through the process, and meaning it's under $1 million to state parks, doesn't cause any more staff time. They're really straightforward in holdings that people just want to gift to state parks, and it actually eases and creates more lands for the public. So I'm thrilled to say we're finally turning that point because there are over 100 projects waiting in a pipeline to get to state parks, most of which are for no cost and just to get, just need to be transferred over, but they haven't been able to do it. So I'm thrilled about that. Affordable housing, very critical issue, very important, and it will continue to always be a tension between what we do. We work in the more rural, remote areas for the most part, generally speaking. Very supportive of affordable housing, but also very supportive. I said we. I am not speaking on post right now. I'm a believer in that affordable housing has to be along transportation and service corridors, so we really need to do more high density affordable housing. That's my opinion, and it needs to be supported by the work we do to protect clean water, clean air, prevent floods, have these amenities for a larger, more dense population. Get off my soapbox now. Thank you all very much for having me here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Walter. And we invite everyone to come over to the library for some lemonade and cookies, or drinks and cookies. And we hope to see you in about a month on April 14th. Thank you.